Good morning, and thank you for joining me for another episode of Saturday Morning Tea with Author JB. This is your girl, Author JB. Before we get into the tea, I would like to take some time out to tell you just who I am and my mission. I am an author. I am also an inspirational Christian vlogger, and this show is an opinionated vlog based on my own life experiences, and it's coming from a Christian's point of view. My mission is to open up dialogue about subject matters that I believe need to be discussed to give us the best chances at living our best blessed life. The tea that I serve, it's real, it's transparent, and it comes from my heart with sincerity and love. I would also like to take some time out to thank you all for your continued support and your encouraging words. They mean a lot to me and they are greatly appreciated, so thank you. But folks, I want to start out by saying we all have a past. See, there are some things in my past that would have me ashamed to face the world if I had not been redeemed by God. For years, I allowed my past, my spotty past, to dictate to me what my future should look like. And as I said in another show, because of my past, I didn't think that I was worthy enough, good enough, or smart enough for anything outside of what the world deemed that I was good enough for. But God said something different. Today, I want to share with you just a piece of my testimony to encourage you or someone that you know in knowing that the outcome of your future is most certainly not determined by the disappointments of your past. When I was 34 years old, I was lying across my bed, inebriated, drunk, from gulping down a filth of E&J brandy right out of the bottle, and I was taking a bottle of Tylenol PMs along with it. I wanted to die that night. I was tired. I wanted that to be my third and final attempt at trying to take my life. I was hoping that when I closed my eyes that night, I would never wake up again. That night, I had also planned to take my children's life along with mine. But later, I decided that it would only be my life I would spare theirs, because I felt like a failure. I felt like I failed at everything, including raising them. I felt unlovable, irrelevant, unconnected to anything or anybody. I was lost, folks. I was in a very, very dark place. And while I was drinking that liquor and taking them pills, I began to cry out to God, asking him, why would you create me? Why? Why would you allow me to be born and live in such a trauma-filled life? And as I cried and I drank and I popped those pills, I began to doze off into this deep sleep I was hoping would be my final sleep. But I began to dream. And the dream took me back to the house where I was raised, and I saw myself back in that place. And in the dream, I saw myself violently fighting in that house with a young lady. And as the fight was ending, I remember I was running down this hallway frantic. And at the end of the hallway stood a mirror. And I had no choice but to see myself in that mirror. And as I was facing myself in that mirror, I looked at myself and I looked hideous and old and haggard and tired. I hated what I saw. My skin looked like it was even melting off my face, and I began to scream out the name of Jesus. And then suddenly, I was picked up in a whirlwind, and I was sitting at a table, looking happy, signing books, and there was a line of customers waiting to get their books signed by me. And I looked vibrant. And then suddenly again, I was in a whirlwind, and I was at a podium speaking to an audience that stretched as far as my eyes could see. And they were engaged in every word that was flowing out of my mouth. I looked relevant. And then suddenly I woke up. When I woke up, I was happy and sad at the same time. I was happy that I saw myself in a different light. And I was sad that I didn't die. But I began to cry out again to God, and I asked him, is that me? Was that me in that dream? I questioned him. And he said to me that night plainly, I have a plan for your life. See, he showed me where I was at the time I was a hostage. And then he showed me where I could be. He told me he would use my life for his kingdom that night. And honestly, I didn't think he would ever choose someone like me. But he brought back to my remembrance when I was 12 years old and I was at church with my grandmama one night. You see, I was raised half Baptist and half Pentecostal, depending on which grandma I spent the weekend with. But this weekend, I was with my Pentecostal grandma, and she took me to the church that night with her. And I remember the speaker dressed in all white, and she called me to the front of the church. And this woman began to speak over my life to the audience. And I can't remember everything she said, but I do remember her pouring oil over my head and the oil dripping down to over my face. And even I can still feel the burn, the sting that was in my eye from the oil going into my eyes. And she said that God has a plan for your life. And she said to me that night that I would prophesy. Now, mind you, I had no idea what any of that was. Because I honestly just like the theatrics of church back then. I loved to sing. I loved to play the tambourine, and I loved to shout. But I didn't know what all that other stuff was. But I do remember that my grandma began to call me her little evangelist back then. I went by that name for many years, even though that by 12 years old, I was already getting high. I was hurting even back then, having to face things that 12-year-old children should not have to face. I felt ugly, and I felt abandoned, and I felt unprotected, and I felt unlovable even back then. I started at 11 years old smoking weed and drinking liquor. And even though I got high throughout my teens, my grandma would still refer to me as her little evangelist. She continued to pour oil over me and continued to pray over me. I remember when I was about 15, 16 years old, I got high with this guy, and I believe he put something in the marijuana because that weed, that joint just didn't sit right with me. I got sick. I got very ill. And the only place that I knew to go was to grandmama's house. And for 3 days, she nursed me with soup, blessing oil, and prayers. She still referred to me even then as her little evangelist. And when I felt better, I left grandmama's house and I headed back to the street corner that I frequented to get some more drugs. By 19 years old, I had done every drug on the market in the 80s, including alcohol, marijuana, uppers, downers, black beauties, purple hearts, hash, opium, cocaine, ecstasy, crack, and heroin. The only drug I had not tried was angel dust, but I was an addict. And for years, many people didn't know how bad my addiction was because I was skinny. I was always skinny, and I could dress it up, so they didn't know that I was an addict. But then I began to look like a crackhead. And one time I remember walking down the street, two guys were in a car, they nudged each other and they pointed their fingers at me and began to laugh. Because back then, people would laugh at crackheads. They made mockery of them. And that particular day, I was mocked. I knew then that I had to find a way out. But I knew it would be hard because at the time I was living in a rooming house with an addict, my boyfriend, and he was abusing me and we both were smoking. And I knew I never could stop with him around because we both were hooked. And not even that mild heart attack I had at 18 from a crack overdose could break the spirit of addiction that had me bound. I just liked to get high. I needed to drown out the pain that I was carrying around in me and feeling. But I will say eventually I did kick those hard drugs. But by then, my mind was so far gone, people was referring to me as crazy. They called me crazy. And I had been in 3 mental hospitals for suicide ideations by the age of 21. And I went from one addiction to another, from drugs to men to violent relationships, even one time facing 4 years in prison myself for aggravated assault. It just wouldn't stop. I was making horrible decisions in my life driven by pain. All of this led me to that night. The night I had the dream. I call it the dream that saved my life. You hear me? You see, seeing myself as an author and speaker, relevant, loved, and knowing that God had a plan for my life, the good, the bad, and the ugly, all of that saved my life. I fought for my dream after that. That next day, I began a new journey in my life called the healing process. You hear me? It wasn't as if things changed overnight now. I had to want that thing bad enough. I had to fight for that thing. I had to fight for purpose and freedom. I had to first have enough faith to believe that what God had told me, that these things were coming to fruition. So then I had to allow him to renew me. God had to deal with 3 areas in my life to get me to my call and purpose. First, he had to deal with my mind. God had to renew my mind. As he was renewing my mind, I began to look at the world differently. I began to look at myself differently. As days and years passed, I didn't see that old haggard woman in the mirror anymore. I began to see beauty. You see, Romans 12:2 says, "Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind, that by testing you may discern what is the will of God, what is good and acceptable and perfect." You see, I love the world. A 12-step program wasn't going to help me because I loved getting high. I loved everything about the world. You see, I had an old discombobulated worldview. So God had to renew this. But as my mind was being renewed, I saw things differently. Things that I used to do began to not feel right anymore. I began to change the company that I kept. And honestly, many of them fell off by themselves, because how can 2 walk together unless they agree? I learned now to put my flesh under subjection when I got cravings and things. I put it under subjection. See, our flesh is weak. We have to take authority over our flesh. I began to place value on my life and myself. And then I began to see my children as gifts instead of burdens as I had in the past. You see, I didn't think much of me, so I couldn't think much of anything that came from me at that time. But I have to say right now that my children are one of the best things that ever happened to me. After God began to renew my mind, life began to look brighter. Secondly, he had to deal with my heart. Psalms 147:3 says, "He heals the brokenhearted and binds up their wounds." You see, by this time I was damaged goods. My heart was decayed, and only God could give it life. Only he could raise it from the dead. As he began to heal my heart, he had to help me with unforgiveness. You see, I had to learn how to forgive people who had hurt me. I had to learn to forgive myself. And, unforgiveness for many years had eaten away at me. But I did learn how to forgive people who hurt me. I learned how to let things go. I love them despite the things that happened. Unforgiveness is too heavy of a burden to bear. And as he began to renew my heart and fix my heart, God taught me how to love myself. I slowly began to fall in love with Jennifer. Third was my belly. I found out that in my belly flowed rivers of living water. You see, John 7:38 says, Jesus said, "He that believeth on me, as the scripture has said, out of his belly shall flow rivers of living water." You see, in my belly, purpose rested. It was where my dreams were stored. I always envisioned it as a precious diamond sitting in the center of my belly, a valuable jewel. And once I allowed myself to be healed by God, I was able to embrace that diamond and was ready to begin to travail, to birth my dreams, and to walk in my purpose. At the same time, I began to speak life over myself. I began to say things like, one day I'm going to write a book about my life. I would even say things about, one day I'm going to be on TVN, or one day I'm going to do this and that. And some of the things I'd speak over my life, made people laugh. And I can understand why. they would do that because at the time they couldn't see anything but my present state. But I was walking by faith. I was speaking that thing. And I believed that it would be. Now, I have not yet been on TBN, but I don't have any doubts that I will be. Because I am constantly fighting for my purpose. And fighting for your purpose isn't easy, but it certainly is worth it. I wrote a quote the other day as I was debating on how to present this episode, because I had doubts about sharing my story. I did have doubts. But after praying about it, I realized it would be a travesty for me not to share. But needless to say, the quote says, "The moment you discover your purpose is the exact moment you'll have something worth fighting for." And I have to say that may be one of the realest things I have ever written, because I know for a fact that I have fought as if I was fighting for my life to fulfill my purpose. And now today, God is using my pain and all of those bad mistakes, bad decisions, and disappointments of my past for purpose. Look at me now. The crackhead those two men laughed at, look at me. Oh my God. The heroin addict, the alcoholic, the abuser and abused, the one tossed around from man to man, a woman who loathed herself, who couldn't recognize nothing good in her. Look at me now. The woman who tried to take her life 3 times now embraces life and wakes up excited to see what's on God's agenda for the day. I have raised beautiful children who are doing well. They all love the Lord. He allowed me even to go back to school and get my degree. You see, because when I was out on the streets, my friends were getting their degrees. So I wanted to accomplish that in my life. I went to God. I wanted to prove to my kids and to myself that we could accomplish anything with God. And now I have my bachelor's degree, and now I am finishing up my MBA, holding a 4.0 GPA. To top it off, God paid for all of it. I have no student debt. Isn't God good? I am now a published author, just like in that dream. It took me 16 years to complete my book, but it is finished. I now speak to people all over on podiums and through the internet, inspiring others right now this day to dream big, to even dream even bigger than me. I am not bragging. I just want to confirm to you today that God watches over His word to perform it. He said He has a plan for my life, and I believe Him. You tell me all things are possible with God, and I will tell you that ain't true. Because I know for a fact that all things are possible with God. You see, God is not a myth to me. He is real to me. Look at me now. I did not have the strength to overcome most of the things that I've overcome in my life. You understand that? You see, we all have purpose. We all have a purpose for something. Don't allow your past to undermine your purpose. Fight for it. Believe in it. According to Romans 2:11, God has no respect of person, meaning He favors none above the others. And boy, am I glad over that. Because I would have been counted out a long time ago if that wasn't true. But you see, He saw something in me, like He sees something in you. You see, God knows who you are. It is up to you to believe you are who He says you are. As your friend and your accountability partner, I have to say this. People will hold you hostage to your past. So you must truly believe in yourself and hold on to that diamond in your belly, your dream, your purpose, because everybody ain't gonna believe in you at first. You ain't gonna believe in you at first. You will have some doubts. To decide to fight for your purpose takes courage and it takes heart. You see, when we are broken and hurting, we make bad decisions and we hurt ourselves and we hurt other people. I have hurt people in my past and I have apologized to many of them. But there are some who still holds me hostage to things that I said and did 30 years ago. Another thing, although they see you, they won't see you. And that's intentional. But don't you get knocked off course trying to prove to anyone who you are. You have to know it, believe, and see who you are. Believe in yourself and trust God. Keep pushing, keep going, and hold on to that living water that is flowing in your belly. Because there is a whole world waiting for that dream, that vision, your purpose to be birthed. Remember this, the outcome of your future is not determined by the disappointments, the mistakes of your past. And if no one else believes in you today, I want to tell you something. I believe in you. Today, I hope that you can take something from my testimony and apply it to your life. I hope that my story can change the trajectory of someone else's story today. That is my fervent prayer. Well, folks, I have come to the end of this episode. This is Author J.B. Allen signing out. And until next episode, remember to dream big, dreamers, because you, my dear, are worth it. God bless.